Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today we're going to be talking about subplots and how to write subplots in your work. Subplots are more minor storylines happening in a novel that run alongside your main plot. Most novels will have several subplots that kind of interweave with the main conflict in order to create a more compelling narrative, more opportunities for character development, and just more overall depth and complexity. Common types of subplots are things like relationship subplots. A lot of books will have a romantic subplot, but key relationships of any kind can be subplots. A lot of the time you'll see mysteries, little side mysteries, or a character developing a skill set, or a really common type of subplot is the main character kind of confronting an aspect of their past. But it could also be something completely different as well. Subplots can look like anything. Those are just some of the more common types. So here are a few tips for integrating subplots into your story. First of all is don't view them as less important just because they have less page time. Just because subplots probably don't have as much time on the page as the main plot doesn't mean that they shouldn't be given just as much care. They should be given just as much attention and care. It just happens in less time. You don't want subplots to feel like an afterthought. You want every aspect of your story to be richly developed and crafted with as much care as possible. So I don't like to think of subplots as lesser. They just inherently don't need as much time on the page, but it doesn't mean they're less important. And along with that, you want to make sure that they're crucial to the story's development. If you could remove a subplot and it wouldn't at all change the story's outcome or the complexity of the story or your character's development, you probably don't need it there. Subplots should be a critical aspect of the story. We shouldn't be able to just remove them and the story would function just the same. If that's the case, it probably should be removed in editing. Subplots should be critical to the story's overall development, which leads to the third point: tie your subplots together. You want to keep tying the subplots together and especially tying them into the main plot. A novel isn't made up of a bunch of threads that just run alongside each other completely separately. All the threads of your story should interact and braid together, and they should affect each other. So it's especially important that you keep tying your subplots into the main plot to avoid the problem I just talked about, which is the subplots ultimately being inconsequential. And one great way to do that is the next step, which is to use your subplots to raise the stakes in the main plot. Use your subplots as a way to complicate the main storyline, and especially to raise the stakes. If, say, you have a mystery subplot and the reveal, the conclusion of that mystery, that new piece of information totally raises the stakes for the main character. Or if you have a relationship subplot, maybe they're, developing feelings for this other character, really raise the emotional stakes and make it that much more important that they succeed in their quest. Subplots are a fantastic way to raise the stakes in the main plot, so take that opportunity. But all of that said, you do want to be on the lookout for subplots taking over the story. Sometimes subplots can kind of start to cannibalize the main storyline to the point that we lose sense of the actual conflict and premise. This is kind of the opposite problem as the first point. Sometimes the subplots are seen as an afterthought, but sometimes they kind of take over. Say, for example, you're writing a fantasy quest book and it has a romantic subplot in it, but you get really into the romantic subplot and it totally takes over and we completely lose sense of the main conflict and we don't touch on it for several chapters. Now, there's kind of two things you can do here. Either totally reevaluate your story and realize that maybe this is the story you want to tell. Maybe you wanted to be writing a fantasy romance. But if the story you want to tell is, a fantasy quest with a romantic subplot, that subplot probably needs to pare back so that it's helping the main storyline, not completely taking over. And finally, use subplots as contrast. Subplots are a great way to make your story more multidimensional. If you have a very plot-driven story, you can use subplots to add more character depth and really take the time to explore the characters. Or if you have a book with a really depressing, intense tone, maybe one of your subplots adds a little bit more levity, which is actually probably going to make those really intense emotions more impactful because there's more dimension. Subplots are a great way to really round out a story, both in terms of character and in terms of emotion and tone. So think about how you can use them to add contrast in a way that actually highlights the main plot as well. So those are a few crucial tips for adding subplots into your story. They're a pretty critical element of most, if not almost all novels. So definitely something to learn how to use effectively. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the Google form linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Friday on this channel. Until next time, bye!